Okay, good morning, everybody, and happy Father's Day to everybody. Thank you, thank you. As we were sitting this morning, I was reflecting on the connection, this deep connection between what in Buddhism we call samadhi, samadhi meaning concentration, when you're sitting in deep concentration. And that deep concentration is something that we can all, whether you're a father or not, we can all experience. And fatherhood can bring us to that place of samadhi. But there's certain things that we want to keep in mind with regards to our practice that can be beneficial for our sitting practice. And these are qualities that I think are parallel to what fathers, like if we can imagine the best of fathers, embodies. And that is one. And I'm not going to, first of all, I'm not the ideal father. I have my own mistakes, and I'm sure all of us have fathers with various deficiencies, and that's why we go to therapy sometimes, right? But there's some qualities that I think we can cultivate that are in alignment with what it means to be a father, from my own experience. One is this idea of not being competitive, a kind of a non-competitiveness. And related to that is a sense of caring or protecting the whole, not just oneself, but the whole. Kind of bringing your attention, bringing your mindfulness to a sense of caring and protecting the whole. All right? And when we sit with that intention, the sense of non-competition, the sense of caring and protecting the whole, samadhi is born, right? Samadhi is born. So the title of this talk here is A Zen Tribute to Fatherhood, a paradigm, the subtitle is A Paradigm for Caring. I'd like to make 3 points for this talk. The first has to do with the evolving father, the father from an evolutionary perspective, and I'll consider some qualities of what it means to be a father from various perspectives. The second is fathering from a Buddhist perspective or a Zen perspective. Where can we find elements within the sutras and within Zen Master Dogen that bring up or highlight this quality of fatherhood, this paradigm of caring? And the third point, the final point I want to make, has to do with going beyond fatherhood and through letting go of the concept of fatherhood. Okay, so those are the 3 points I want to make. Let's start with the first one. The first one is regarding the evolving father. So I want to suggest that baked in to the very structure of the universe is this sense of fatherhood, or what I'm calling, so I'm thinking of fatherhood as in a much broader context here, this practice or this feeling for caring for others. This feeling for caring for others. And we can start by looking at the very foundational level of life, and that is the elemental level, where you've got protons and electrons and this bonding that takes place between various atoms, right? So on the very basic, like the atoms that make up this hand, you want to look at your own hand, look at your hand. The atoms that make this up are bonded together. This hand, somehow it creates this particular structure. And it's so interesting, like if you look at other mammals, it's not too dissimilar. We have, there's something about having a palm and then what we call fingers or toes coming out of it. That's very interesting, isn't it? And that the universe kind of structures, there's an intention towards a certain kind of a patterning involved. And that patterning requires bonding. Right? And I think that's one of the roles of a father, is to, on a human level, on the level of people and on the level of family, is to cultivate, to create, to make room for these bonds to be strong and firm. Now, of course, we have dysfunctionality in our families, but just kind of think about the possibilities. And I'm not suggesting that everything's all perfect and fine. I'm just suggesting that we bring forth, whether you're a father or not, bring forth these qualities in your relationships. And this quality of bonding, creating a firm bond, is not removed from you. It's right here. It's right in our own hands. Right? If we look closely at the elemental structure, or if we look at the planets, right? The planets revolving around, like Earth revolving around the sun. There's a relationship there. There's a bond there that takes place between the Earth as it circles the sun. And we refer to the Earth itself in many cultures, including our own. We refer to the Earth itself as mother and the sun as father. All right, so there's this circling that takes place. There's a bond, there's a connection between them. And it's just, when we start to think like on the cosmic level of things, we can start, if we look at this properly, we can start to look at the rareness of life itself in the universe, right? And to develop an appreciation for the development of life itself, how it evolved here on planet Earth. This is the only planet that we know of in the universe that has life on it. That's something worth reflecting on. On the chemical level, molecules are interacting, and through evolution, sometimes something happens and these molecules complexify. Early on in the formation of life on Earth, if you study science at all, maybe some of you know this, but maybe not all of you, but the first creatures to live on our planet were unicellular organisms. And then this amazing thing happened where these unicellular organisms started producing this toxic element called oxygen. And it would destroy these unicellular organisms. They were being destroyed by their own waste until something amazing happened. Life found a way to deal with itself dying off. And that is the unicellular organisms combined and made multicellular organisms that were able to take in the oxygen and actually use it as a means to nourish the body. So where it was one time toxic, now it's nourishing. And we see the complexity in just the formation of life. You have in mammals, you have an egg, sperm, and there's fertilization. And there's this growing complexity that takes place inside of a woman's body that is beyond our. We don't control that. Plants also give birth to each other. Fish give birth. On the on the level of the fish, it's a little bit different because there's not the same kind of intimacy that we experience with in the human realm. There's the eggs they're all external, and the male fish comes through and fertilizes the eggs, and there's no kind of interaction there other than that. And then the father is off, right? And the mother's off, and then these fish are born. But then life starts to complexify as you get into mammals, where the father begins to stick around, and there are certain qualities. I mean, and I'm of course speaking of in the best case scenarios, right? The father sticks around, and you can see even in mammals like cats and dogs and lions, there's a playfulness that takes place between a parent, whether it's a father or mother, and the offspring. And human beings, we include all those qualities that came before us, that have evolved before us, from unicellular organisms through fish, through mammals, all of it. We include all of that, and there's a sense of also caring for one's one's offspring, until not even just until adulthood, but until death. That's really amazing if you think about it, that humans care for, or at least we have the capacity to care for, and we see examples of humans caring for their children, not just until they reach adulthood, but until they die. Not just until those children reach adulthood, but until the parent themselves dies. They are concerned about their children. That's a really amazing and remarkable thing to reflect on when you think about this evolution from an evolutionary perspective of this evolving and changing Earth community. So some of these qualities of fatherhood, and you might find these qualities, I'm just going based on my own reflection on this, but you might find these qualities in other aspects of life as well. But I'm just using fatherhood as an example. There's a sense of relationship, of complexity, of complexifying those relationships, of creation, the sense of presence, playfulness. Playfulness is huge, especially among us mammals. There's a sense of interest and curiosity, right? We bring great curiosity. That's so important for our Zen practice too, to have that curiosity about our own existence. And it starts just that curiosity about our breathing, the very fact that we can breathe, to develop curiosity there. And it's so obvious if you are holding or caring for a newborn baby, that curiosity and interest is so 100% there. I mean, it can be also experienced as some degree of anxiety and fear, but there's also the sense of amazement in the whole process, that it's something much bigger going on than we can understand. And lastly, the sense of caring for our offspring until we actually die ourselves. That's very interesting to me. So, to conclude this particular section, the pattern of caring is found throughout the universe, throughout the physical universe. Right? This pattern of caring for others is found throughout the physical universe, and of course includes humans. And my question for us to reflect on is, where does this caring come from? Right? Just think about that. You don't have to answer it, but ask the question, where does this ability to care, where does it arise? Right? Okay, now I want to go into the second part, and that is Buddhist or Zen elements that we can find around this topic of fathering. And I want to point to two. The first one comes from Dogen. And he says that it is the case that the parent, or we could say the father, but of course the parents create the child. The parents create the child. Where do the parents come from? He's not asking this question. I'm asking this question. Dogen says the parent produces the child. I'm asking you, where does the parent come from? Where does the parent come from? Most people would say, well, they have their parents, and they're right. That's kind of, we think in terms of this linear way of thinking. All right, well, I came from my father, and he came from his father and mother, etc. back. But Dogen looks at it different. He says, if I were to ask Dogen where the parent came from, he would say, the parent comes from the child. I find that response of Dogen's, or that statement where he says, it's true, the child comes from the parent, and the parent is born from the child. There's no parent without child, right? So this is the sense of interbeing. There is no parent without a child. The parent only is because there is a child, not because of their father or their mother. The parent is because of the child. Because the parent is taking care of this being, there is a parent. The parent doesn't exist outside of that relationship. Now, there's a story. Okay, so that's Zen Master Dogen. That's Zen Master Dogen. In the Lotus Sutra, there's this wonderful story in the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra. Sometimes we chant that sutra. We chanted it last week, actually, the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra. But we just chant the verse portion of it. The verse is much shorter than the whole chapter. So we do an abbreviated version of it. But if you read the whole chapter, you get a bigger context for this story. So the crux of the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra, the name lifespan, is to show that the Buddha has these two dimensions to him. There is the historical Buddha that existed in time and space, was born and died in a certain location. But then there is this other Buddha that's always existing, the universal Buddha, the Buddha of the ultimate dimension. And the lifespan chapter uses this wonderful story to talk about why this, how do we don't see the Buddha. The sutra says the students of the Buddha, his monks and his sangha was saying, the Buddha died. Where is this other Buddha coming from? Where's this universal Buddha? I don't see any Buddha. And so the Buddha starts to illustrate this with a story of a physician. He says that there was once upon a time, there was a physician, and he was a very skilled physician. He could create all kinds of medicines that could cure so many different diseases. However, if you took the wrong medicine, it could also make you delirious. One time, the physician came home to find his children completely delirious because they had taken his medicines without his knowing it and without his prescription. In other words, they were being naughty. Right? They were being naughty kids. And so this physician, he creates all the remedies necessary to counter the delirium of his children. And some of his children took the remedy because they respected the father. But others chose not to, and they remained in their delirium. So the father was beside himself with worry and anxiety because he didn't know what to do. If my kids don't take my remedy, well, what do I do now? I don't know how else to cure their disease. So he devises a plan. He says, okay, I can't do it. He says, I'm going to go to a far-off country. I'm going to leave now for a far-off. He tells his children, I'm leaving for a far-off country, and I won't be back for a long time. So he goes to this far-off country, and then he writes a letter back to them saying that he has died. Of course, it's not him writing the letter, but he sends a letter back notifying his family that he has died. Although he hasn't actually died. See, that's the key. He hasn't actually died, but he sends the word back that he's died. And the children, all of the family, of course, is in remorse now. And those children who didn't take the remedy when he told them to were so filled with remorse that they took the remedy and they got better. And that was the point of the story, that sometimes the father needs to disappear in order to be effective. Sometimes the one who's in charge needs to be gone in order for the children to receive to take in that medicine. And a little bit later in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha himself compares himself to like the father. He refers to himself as the good physician in this story. Just like in this story, he's like a good physician. Although truly alive, sometimes I disappear because of various obstacles that prevent students from seeing me. All right, the arrogance that crops up in students. So the Buddha, one of his skillful ways is to appear to be extinct when truly he is not. He's always here. And if we go to the Buddha with an open heart and the desire to see the Buddha, guess what? The Buddha is never left. He only appears to be extinct, but in truth he's always there. Right? And this has real ramifications for us too, as not just as students, but as we care for things. Whether we're a father or not a father doesn't really matter, but it's giving us an example of not only the power of the father, but how to be in relationship. Sometimes we need to let go in order for that relationship to really flourish. Just like the good physician's children. Sometimes the father needs to step away in order for the children to grow. Right? You can't always have somebody hovering over you, in other words. And I don't recommend at all that we, abandon our children like this physician did, especially if they're little kids. But that's the larger point. I'm just trying to make a larger point of the importance of when to hold on and when to let go. Okay, the third point I want to make, this is the last one, is to take this. So let's just review for a second. There is this kind of element of caring that we could call fathering or caring for, that pervades the universe. It shows up in humans in a very profound way. And the Buddha himself saw himself as a father for the entire world, for all beings. He sees himself as a father. And that's something that you can do too. Or if you prefer mother, that's fine. You can, whatever pronoun you want to use there. But there's this sense of deep caring for all beings, as a father of all beings, to bring that quality. And remember what I said earlier, that when we bring a quality of caring to whatever it is that we are engaged with, whatever it is we are in relationship with, samadhi is born, concentration is born from that. Now, I want to just take this one more step. There's a story. There's a story of these three men are building a temple, and they're each carrying a stone. And somebody asks them, each one of them, one by one, "What is it that you're doing?" And the first man says, "I am carrying a stone." In other words, he doesn't recognize that he's building a temple. And by temple, I'm not talking about a literal temple, but the temple is your larger purpose, right? Whatever that might be, and that's going to be different for all of us. Whatever our purpose for being here in this life is, that's the temple. So this man, the first man, he just says, "I'm carrying a stone." He doesn't make any connection. He hasn't made any connection between the work he's doing and his larger purpose. Now the second man, when he's asked what he's doing, he says, "I'm providing for my family." So this second man, he recognizes that there's a larger purpose, that why he's doing what he's doing. I'm caring for my family. Right? Now the third man, he's asked, what are you doing? And the third man says, "I'm building a temple." So this third man, actually, he recognizes the larger work that needs to be done. And oftentimes, you can put yourself in one of these three kind of categories. You could be the person who does work, but doesn't really understand why he's doing the work he's doing, but he knows he needs to do something with his life. He's got to make some. The second person has connected that work with caring for his immediate family. And that's a noble pursuit. But the third man, he recognizes that there's something even larger than caring for one's immediate family. And that also, because, all of us, if we, particularly for those who are parents, but for anything that we're doing, sometimes we get so caught up in our care that we forget that there's a larger purpose behind it. It can include that making a living to earn for your family. It can include that, but there's got to be something even bigger than that, right? So the question you can ask, what is your purpose? What's the temple that you're building? Right? There's and to connect this deeper with Buddhism, there's something called the 5 awarenesses. And the fourth awareness goes like this: everyone that I love, all the things that I care for, are of the nature to change. There's no way to stop being separated from those that I love and care about. Everything is of the nature to change. Even those that I love deeply and dearly, they're of the nature to change. There's no way to prevent being separated at times, not always, but at times, from being separated from them. And so, if our family is the only thing that we care about, at those times we're going to find ourselves at a loss. And there's got to be something larger, something bigger than our immediate family, as important as our families are. Something larger that can hold the family, even in the midst of transition, of change. All right? So, I want to close with a poem. Where does Father come from? Entering into this question ushers forth the compassionate Buddha. Thank you.